Ma'am. There you go.
Hi, I'm Diana Carell from the Navy Times. Congresswoman, I know that you've previously spoken about, wanting the Navy to better articulate its needs. So, looking ahead to the next budget season, what do you want to see differently from the Navy, and what do you want to see it specifically request?
Okay, that's a pretty lengthy question, but I'll try to give a short answer. I mean, I want the Navy to come to us in Congress and clearly explain why they're requesting what they're requesting. In a sense, I've mentioned a few times through this conversation, the strategy. And what's at risk if we don't do it. I think that's the biggest piece that's been missing to me. I think that we need to build a strong fleet, we need to modernize the fleet, but we need to continue to build the ships that we can build effectively and in the numbers as many as we can. The DDG, getting that new FFG program off the ground, ramping up those numbers, increasing that and expanding when appropriate to a second yard, making sure that the carrier program's on track, Virginia-class submarines, and Columbia-class is absolutely essential and remains the number one priority. But that's just mentioning individual platforms. And the problem is that's kind of where the discussion normally stops. And then the discussion then goes back to sort of Brent's question of like who builds what and whose district and who can strong arm who the most to up these in the priority ranking. And the truth is we need to look at this from the top, from a national security perspective. We need to look at the current threat that China poses to the United States, world order, to free trade. And then we need to look at that and fit down, not just in the Navy, but all the services budgets where things are broken up. I mean, I think that one-third split notionally, it doesn't work in this environment. We need to put a preponderance of resources to the Navy and the Air Force because of the theater and the geography of the Pacific and the platforms that we need to operate there. And we also need to look at other capabilities. I mean, there's some sort of, if you're looking at a deterrent force and how we would actually come to the defense of Taiwan, if we would, and I'll get back to that later, is that, there are things that we don't typically invest in. I mean, what about offensive mine laying? What about the LRASM, the long-range anti-surface missile, and making sure that that's a priority of the Air Force? I asked the Chief of Staff of the Air Force about both of those things last year, and it was kind of so low down in their priority list that the hearing, he said, well, I'll have to get back to you with answers on those things. But the real question, I think, as well is, what is our policy with regards to Taiwan? We've had this policy of strategic ambiguity for decades, which is not clear whether, the United States would react. But I think that we need to change our policy to a policy of strategic clarity. If the United States will react to maintain the status quo, if China attempts to take Taiwan by force, the United States will react to maintain the status quo. And I think that overarching statement can help influence and shape what we're building our military to look like and what missions we need them to perform. And, I've talked a lot as well about authorities. If you look at the Taiwan Relations Act, for example, it is not a mutual defense treaty. It doesn't require us to come to Taiwan's aid. And if you look at the War Powers Act and the fact that there really is no authority for the president to intervene without coming for consent of Congress. And so 120 miles across the strait is a very short distance. And I can tell you that Congress cannot make a decision about anything, especially not an authorization for use of military force or a declaration of war, for example, in the time frame that it would take China to cross the 120 miles across the strait. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have now, and I think we need to codify that, whether that's a change to the Taiwan Relations Act or another mechanism within the law. I think we need to make that commitment. And I think the fact that China believes that the United States would react is really one of the key deterrents. We need to tell them that's what we intend to do.